I think documentary is absolutely crucial to the world of photography at the moment. When you think about the world, you think about news organizations, you think how homogenized the world has become. The actual voice of the individual artist and photographer and their connection to the world and them trying to make sense of this crazy world that we live in is absolutely essential. And the great thing is, as well as having the value of documenting what goes on, you at the same time can potentially make photography and art that can stand alone. So I think the role of the documentary photographer is absolutely crucial. The way in which it's done is changing quite dramatically because the notion of the photojournalist, that humanistic photojournalist that we all know and love from the past, is changing. We need a different take, and I think what's fascinating about coming to Latin America is we see a different type of photography here to what we might find in Europe or Japan or America. And I'm very excited to be here. I think there's some excellent new work going on, and I think it's an exciting place to be.
Looking for this documentary photography timeline that you just made, where you put your work, where you think that your work should be fitted in?
My own personal work?
Yeah.
It's difficult for me to comment on my own work because it's easier for me to comment about other people. I mean, I'm interested in trying to say about what's happening in the world. I'm interested in the zeitgeist. The danger with documentary is that you can be too nostalgic. We can be living in the past. We can be photographing a lifestyle, which is always more interesting that is going rather than the ones that are newly created. It's interesting, when I first joined Magnum many years ago, there was a lot of controversy and antagonism towards my work. And I think this was because I was offering a sort of different critique on the modern world. I was looking at consumerism, I was looking at tourism, the big isms of the world. And when you think about this now and who we are and what's happening, these to me are very much the dominant themes. When this was presented at Magnum, there was some apprehension about this. But I think in a sense now we understand 15, 20 years later that understanding these roles and seeing the world in this sense is absolutely crucial to our understanding of it. So I hope in a sense I've been somewhat vindicated because the things I've been interested in, to me, are not getting smaller, they're getting bigger all the time. And, you know, although the individual person doesn't have much control in their lives, if you like, in the bigger scale of things, you know, the whole notion of this mass tourism and what's happening, the homogenization, these to me are absolutely essential issues.
In this event, we're trying to debate the boundaries, the frontiers, and your work when you talked about consumerism and about tourists. Do you still believe that there is an identity or a frontier, or the mass consume and the mass tourism and all the things that you saw during your career made you change your idea?
Very much so. I mean, what's interesting is we have BRIC. You know, we have Brazil, Russia, India, and China, the big new economies. And we all know that, for example, Brazil's role in the future is going to be even bigger still. It's a very vibrant, forceful economy. And inevitably, therefore, we need to address the issues that all this vibrancy and all this economic confusion and progress throws up. Because always with these things, there's a downside. You know, people become victims. Even though maybe poverty has eased somewhat in Brazil, it doesn't mean all our problems are solved. So I think, in particularly when you think about the BRIC countries, you know, having work coming from here, dealing with these new countries, what's happening, because in years to come, it's going to be the big story, what happens to these four countries and how they're going to sort of take over the old world, America, Europe, you know, as they slowly fade away and these countries become more and more important. So I think documenting this and being involved in this, trying to understand this, is absolutely crucial to our understanding.
Does you talk about you just talk about good stories? Do you think that good stories come along with good photos?
Well, what happens is very interesting because within, say, Latin America, you can see how different countries emerge and different places become interesting. For example, I've just curated the Brighton Photo Festival in Britain. This is the biggest festival in the UK. And one of the great successes that we've shown are two Argentine photographers. And at the moment, I feel there's an amazing energy in Argentina, and their photographers are very mature, they're doing things very differently. And in a sense, I think it's their moment, in the way that I don't quite know when Brazil's moment is, but you look at Europe, and 10, 15 years ago it was Germany, and now it's Holland. So all the time in the world of photography, energies change, and places come and go. And I think the resurgence that we're seeing generally in Latin America, and particularly I would say Argentina are absolutely fascinating.
You're talking so much about Latin America. Do you feel an identity in Latin American photography that goes beyond the geographical boundaries?
Well, I think what's going to happen over the next year and 2 years maybe is that people are now understanding that something is really interesting going on here. I'm working on this book about Latin American photo books, which will come out in a year's time. We've just this morning finalized the list. This is going to have a huge impact on the way people understand and read Latin American photography, because I think people in Europe and America are blissfully unaware about what's going on. And the irony is that also the books that are being published here, even within Brazil or Mexico or Argentina or Chile, people have been incredibly ignorant about what's gone on in their own country, let alone in the rest of Latin America. So when you look at the incredible achievements of what has been published and you put them all together, it's incredibly forceful. And I think when this is packaged and published in 4 languages, the impact that it's going to have is going to be quite considerable. And then people, when they come here, they find out that there is very interesting work. So I think, in a sense, Latin America's time in the role of contemporary photography is really going to come within 5 years to a much bigger peak than we understand now.
You talk about photo books. I heard that you are a big collector. How did this passion begin, and how you managed to keep this collection up?
It's very difficult. I've been collecting photographic books for 30 years, and I now have so many books, maybe 13, 14,000. I have a big problem with storage.
I can imagine.
So luckily, because I've done very well as a photographer, I've been able to reinvest the money that I've earned into this photographic collection. I've got a building now. I've got a very big house in Bristol. I also have another building. It's an old bank that I've converted, and here I have my various libraries. And in the old bank, away from my house, I keep America and Europe. It's the old world. And the things that are most exciting and important to me, Britain, because of course I come from Britain, Latin America, Japan, they're all in the basement of my house. And this to me is the most interesting collections, because both books from Japan in the post-war period and indeed from Latin America are so fantastic that they deserve to be collected, understood, which of course is what's going on to this project that we're working on.
Your latest discoveries are the Latin Americans, or there's someone else on this path that got your attention?
Well, my latest discovery is China, in fact.
It's China. Wow.
Because I hoped in about 3 years' time to be responsible for producing a book about Chinese photography books. But in the meantime, Latin America, of course, is the place where we've been concentrating together with a team of people from Latin America, from Horacio Fernandez. We've traveled around Latin America trying to find these books, squeezing them out of the corners, asking photographers, asking dealers and collectors. And we've really had to tease these books out. They weren't there on a plate, because basically no one knew what was there. This all came about, of course, because of the forum that we had 3 years ago. And we were all very excited about seeing the Book of Amazonia by Claudia Angula. And you showed this to other Brazilian photographers. They didn't know it. And here we have one of the masterpieces of Latin American photography. They did not know this book. I mean, this is incredible, really. We all know Claudia's earlier black and white work. This is much more famous. But the color work that she did with George Love is extraordinary. So here it was on our doorstep, literally a kilometer down the road, where Claudia lives on Paulista, and people did not know this work. So what a fantastic opportunity then to bring all these things out, to collate them, put them together, and to offer the book so the rest of the world can appreciate what's going on, and of course the rest of Latin America, because they too did not know.
What amuses you in the photo books is this possibility of spreading an idea that nobody knew before?
Well, what we're doing, because I've worked already on 2 volumes of photographic book history with Phaidon, which I did with Jerry Badger, it's really like a revisionist history. What we're trying to do is very straightforward. We're taking the photographic history. We have this established history, predominantly done by American academics about not only America and Europe, but the rest of the world, most of which they marginalize. You know, the footnote, Latin America is purely a footnote in the history of photography as it's established now. We have to change this. This is outrageous. So part of the process of these number of books that are coming out is to completely revise the history, to give it back to the photographers, if you like. And this is very important, because the information that we learn by finding these books comes from photographers. It's them that we go to ask, what were the books that inspired you? What books have you seen? What books have you collected? So we're taking it away from those lazy curators at the top of the, the photographic triangle, if you like, and bringing it back to the photographers. And this is a very exciting process. So in doing so, we're rewriting and reevaluating photographic history. And it's there to be written because it's so incredibly inaccurate up to date.
How do you manage, like so many, you are a photographer, you are an editor. I heard that you already made one documentary like 97 or 2007, something like that. How you manage all the activities?
I get up early.
You get up early?
And I go to a lot of places. No, I'm very well traveled. I'm very lucky, I'm very privileged. I can work as a photographer in many countries. I get invited, like coming here. So, you know, I have a very good knowledge of what's going on because there's nowhere where there's any sizable photographic community where I haven't been. And when I get to these places, I meet people, I make connections, I get, if you like, correspondence. So I now have many friends in Latin America, and when they see something, they can pass the information on to me. When a book is published, they'll tell me. So this is how you accumulate this knowledge, and this is how you accumulate the books, which in order, if you like, I can feed into my projects as a curator, as an editor, and of course as my work as a photographer.
Do you believe that photography can change the world?
No. Photography, ultimately, I mean, the thing about photography is it's basically a luxury item. The reason why photography in Brazil has flourished in the last 10, 20 years is because Brazil's economy has done very well. The reason why photography in China has become so huge in the last 20 years is because the Chinese economy has done incredibly well. So when you have a big economy doing well, one of the things you get is photography. You can't have a bankrupt economy propelling the photography machine. You need to sell prints, you need to commission photographers, you need that machinery to back it up. And because photography in art and documentary is ultimately the ultimate luxury item. We have functional photography in magazines and wedding photographers and doing, you know, fashion and advertising. But the thing that we're talking about here, which is absolutely, in a sense, quite elite, even though it can be very democratic at the same time, is basically a byproduct of wealth.